Easter Saturday, April 10th, 1993. Dawn Park, Boksburg, South Africa. A man has just walked to his local corner store to buy a newspaper. He is 50 years old. He is the most popular black political leader in South Africa, second only to Nelson Mandela himself. He has survived multiple assassination attempts. He has fought his entire life for the freedom of his people. He steps out of his car. A red Ford Laser pulls up behind him. A man gets out, calls his name. He turns around. 4 bullets. And in that single moment, South Africa came closer to a full-scale race war than at any point in its entire history. To understand why Chris Hani's murder shook an entire nation to its foundation, you need to understand what he meant to millions of South Africans. Born Martin Tembisile Hani on June 28, 1942, in Kofinvaba in the Eastern Cape, he grew up under the crushing weight of apartheid, South Africa's brutal system of institutionalized racial segregation that classified, controlled, and humiliated black South Africans from birth to death. As a boy, he was so devout he wanted to become a priest. His father discouraged it. He studied Latin and classics at the University of Fort Hare, one of the few universities that admitted black students, and earned his degree. He was brilliant. But apartheid had no use for brilliant black men. He joined the ANC Youth League at 15, then the South African Communist Party at 19, then Umkhonto weSizwe, the armed wing of the ANC, at 20. For decades, he lived underground, in exile, directing guerrilla operations against the apartheid regime from bases in Lesotho and Zambia. The South African security forces designated him public enemy number 1. There were multiple attempts on his life, including a car bomb. He survived them all. When Nelson Mandela was released from prison in 1990 and the ANC was unbanned, Chris Hani came home. And South Africa, especially its youth, went wild for him. He was charismatic, passionate, and fearless. He spoke the language of the streets. He was the only political leader who had real influence over the radical township self-defense groups that had broken away from ANC authority. Some political analysts believed he would eventually surpass Mandela himself. The apartheid regime understood this, and they were terrified of him. By April 1993, South Africa was sitting on a knife's edge. Negotiations between the ANC and the apartheid government of F.W. de Klerk were underway, a painstaking, fragile attempt to peacefully dismantle apartheid and transition to democracy. But powerful forces on the far right were determined to destroy those negotiations. White supremacist organizations, including the Conservative Party and the Afrikaner Weerstandsbeweging, the AWB, believed that any handover of power to black South Africans was a betrayal of everything they stood for. They wanted the negotiations to fail. They wanted chaos. They wanted war. And they had compiled a plan to make it happen. Among the names on their list of targets was Nelson Mandela. And at the very top of that list was Chris Hani. Because they understood something clearly. If Chris Hani was killed, the rage of millions of black South Africans, especially the militant youth, might be impossible to contain. South Africa would burn. The negotiations would collapse. The apartheid security forces would declare a state of emergency, and white minority rule might survive. It was a calculated, cold-blooded political strategy. And on Saturday, 1993, they put it into motion. At approximately 10:20 in the morning, Chris Hani stepped out of his car in the driveway of his home on Hekia Crescent, Dawn Park, Boksburg. He had just returned from buying a newspaper at the corner store. His daughter Nomakwezi, 15 years old, was at home. A red Ford Laser pulled up behind him. The driver, a white man, stepped out. He called out, Mr. Hani. Chris Hani turned around. The man raised a 9mm pistol, a Z88 registered in someone else's name, and shot him once in the body. Then he stood over him and fired 3 more times. 2 bullets to the chest, 2 subsonic bullets to the head. Chris Hani died at the scene. The killer got back in the red Ford Laser and drove away. What happened next is where this story takes its first extraordinary turn. A neighbor, a white Afrikaner housewife named Margarita Hamse, had seen the red Ford Laser speeding away. She had the presence of mind to write down the license plate number. She called the police. Within hours, the killer was arrested. His name was Janos Walos, a Polish immigrant, a far-right anti-communist, and a man who had not acted alone. When police searched Janos Walos, they found 2 weapons. When they searched his home, they found something far chilling: a hit list, typed up, urbanized, detailed. The names on that list included Nelson Mandela, senior ANC leaders, journalists, activists. 23 names in total, all targeted for assassination. The weapon used to kill Hani was traced to a theft from the South African Air Force in Pretoria in 1990. Walos had not obtained it himself. It had been provided to him by a man named Clive Derby Lewis, a sitting member of parliament for the Conservative Party, South Africa's most powerful pro-apartheid opposition party. Derby Lewis had supplied the gun, registered in his wife's name. He had provided detailed intelligence on Hani's home address and daily routine, and the hit list found in Walos's possession had been typed on a computer belonging to Derby Lewis. But there was a third person, a journalist named Arthur Kemp, who would later emerge as a leading figure in the international far right, supplied Hani's home address to the conspirators. And investigators suspected the network went deeper. According to journalist Justice Malala, whose book on the assassination is now considered the definitive account, the regular police investigating the murder were instructed by the security police not to probe Walos's links to his employer, a man named Peter Jackson. Jackson owned the red Ford Laser that Walos drove on the day of the killing. And the killer's diary, seized from the police docket, later appeared with several pages missing. Someone had interfered with the evidence. Who gave that instruction? Who removed those pages? 30 years later, we still don't fully know. The news of Chris Hani's murder spread across South Africa like a shockwave. Within hours, protests erupted in Cape Town, Durban, and Port Elizabeth. 7 people were killed in the violence, hundreds were injured. In the areas around Johannesburg and Pretoria alone, 80 people died in violence directly linked to the assassination. Gun sales skyrocketed as white South Africans, terrified of the rage building in the townships, rushed to arm themselves. On April 14th, the ANC declared a national day of protest. An estimated 6 million black workers stayed away from their jobs, and 2.5 million people flooded the streets. The all-night vigil held at FNB Stadium outside Soweto descended into carnage. South Africa was on the brink, and the men who planned the assassination watched it all unfold and waited to see if their plan had worked. It was Nelson Mandela who stopped it. Though not yet president, not even yet a candidate in an election, Mandela addressed the nation on national television on April 14, 1993. He spoke directly to black South Africans. He acknowledged their rage, he shared their grief, and then he said this: "Now is the time for all South Africans to stand together against those who wish to destroy what Chris Hani gave his life for, the freedom of all of us." It was a most consequential speech in South African history, and it worked. The country pulled back from the edge. Just barely. In October 1993, just 6 months after the assassination, Walos and Clive Derby Lewis were convicted of murder. Both were sentenced to death. In a twist of history that neither man could have anticipated, The new democratic government and constitution they had tried to destroy abolished the death penalty. Their sentences were commuted to life imprisonment. In 1997, both men appeared before South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and for the first time, in public, on record, Valush explained his motive. He said he did it to plunge the country into a state of chaos that would allow the right wing to take over. He said he was motivated by his experiences growing up under communism in Poland. He said directly that he did it for the Conservative Party. Both men applied for amnesty. Both were refused. Debbie Lewis died in prison in 2016. Valush, after years of legal battles and multiple rejected parole applications, was finally released in 2022 following a constitutional court ruling. He was deported to Poland. He walked free. But the deeper questions: how far up the apartheid security apparatus did the conspiracy truly go? Who instructed police to stop investigating Valush's employer? Who removed the pages from his diary? Were there others on the hit list who were warned? Were never fully answered. The TRC process, for all its extraordinary work, could not compel full disclosure, and those who knew the most took their secrets with them. 1 year and 17 days after Chris Hani was murdered in his driveway, South Africa held its first fully democratic election. Nelson Mandela became president. Apartheid was over. The men who killed Chris Hani had wanted to stop that from happening. They failed. But here is the question that history keeps asking. What kind of South Africa would Chris Hani have helped build had he lived? He was brilliant. He was radical. He believed in economic justice as fiercely as he believed in political freedom. He understood that ending apartheid was only the first step, that poverty, inequality, and unemployment were the battles still to come. Those battles are still being fought today. And South Africa, with its staggering inequality, its unemployment crisis, its ongoing struggles, is in many ways still living in the shadow of what was lost that Easter Saturday morning. A white Afrikaner housewife wrote down a license plate number and saved South Africa from civil war. A Polish assassin fired 4 bullets and changed the course of a continent. And somewhere in the missing pages of a police docket, the full truth of who else was involved may still be hiding. This is Africa Unsolved. If this story moved you, share it. History this important deserves to be heard. Subscribe. A new case drops every Friday. The truth always leaves a trail.